I've not been allowed any slides at all. And I haven't even been allowed space for my speech. I think it's important that we remember why we're here. We're here because of Ed Whitley. And I think the first thing I want to say is why I support the Whitley Fund. I wanted to give money to conservationists like Pablo in the field, and I didn't want it to disappear into WWF's overhead in Geneva. And I didn't know how to do that. And then I was introduced to Ed Whitley, and I realized that this was the way to do it. And what Ed does is he takes your money, and then he finds people, and he makes them go through the most god-awful process. If Ed ever asks you to be involved in the judging panel, refuse. They have to fill out a 70-page form. Oh, look, I'm pushing buttons. Well, why don't we stay on that one? It's a nice photo. There we go. Oh, there, I've killed it. And the judging form it's just horrendous. And the process they go through to win the money is so rigorous that you have complete confidence when they get it that it'll be a success. And the amazing thing is it is a success. And if you look at Pablo's work, I want to ask him in the Q&A, how much money does he spend a year to do all that? Because that is a hell of a lot of stuff he's doing, and it seems incredible. So I think you should all support Ed Whitley. I believe many of you do, but he really puts the money where it's needed, and that's why I continue to do it. I want to say that I think Pablo is amazing, and I thought that was a great speech, and I think you're really clever because you've got a charismatic species, which is so nice. And wasn't it great how you could just name-check movies every time there was a penguin? And as a film producer, which is what I do, to have a movie about every species you're trying to save is really great. And in fact, I had to make a film about the species I was trying to save because nobody was even vaguely interested in doing so. And the film I made was The End of the Line, which is a film about the industrial overfishing of the oceans. And it's not a film about anything charismatic. And in fact, we made a deliberate decision to not mention the 10 million sharks killed a year, or 100 million, or the 500,000 dolphins caught in fishing nets every year, or even the 10,000 whales killed by fishing boats, because that makes it an emotional story. And the film we made was really about food security and about the fact that if we don't stop overfishing, there will be no fish. And personally, I want to keep eating fish. So it's a strictly selfish business for me. I want to eat sushi in 30 or 40 years' time. And in order to do that, we have to behave sensibly right now. So we made a film that was modestly successful, far more successful than we thought it would be. And it's not to say I made any money with it, but we did achieve change. And I think people responded to this idea that there was a crisis in the oceans, that overfishing was a solvable problem. We pitch it as the world's largest solvable problem, because I think global warming is intractable, and I think population is the elephant in the room, and that leaves overfishing as really one of the biggest global issues we can address. So then we thought, as the film became successful and people were coming up to us and saying, what are you going to do? How do I do this? Well, I want to create a marine reserve. What do we do? We thought, okay, well, let's see who we can channel them to. And it turns out that no NGO was really creating marine reserves. And a lot of people are working in that space, but they're not actually delivering them. And I don't mean to offend everybody if there are people in the room who do work on that, but nobody was purely focused on it. So we decided to rip off RED, which is Bono's rather brilliant charity, which uses corporate relationships to leverage money for Africa, essentially. And we decided to create Blue. And we thought we would make blue products and get people to buy blue things and then create marine reserves. So from the very beginning, Blue was about making money to fundamentally give other people to spend, because I didn't want to spend it. I don't have the experience to actually create a marine reserve and enforce it. To do that, you need to be ZSL or Pew or WWF or people on the ground. So I just wanted to make money and give it to the ocean. So we started out with that, and then we rapidly realized that fish are not charismatic, which comes back to Pablo, and that nobody is ever going to choose a fish over cancer, their granny, children dying in Africa, or AIDS. Those are the big things. You're never going to donate to a fish over that. So in fact, you have to go somewhere else, and you have to find other people to give money to, and that's one of the things we've done. So Blue fundamentally exists to do two things: to create marine reserves and to bring private sector solutions to the sea. And I will explain what that means, because even I don't fully understand it. And also to raise more money for the ocean, because this is a great statistic. 1% of charitable giving in the UK goes to the environment. and 1% of the environmental giving goes to the ocean. So the ocean, that covers 70% of the surface of the world, gets 1% of 1%, which is, if you don't mind me saying. So we were like, got to make money for the sea. Now, the good news is, as a solvable problem, it's quite sexy. So what we do is we try and find other people's projects that are just missing that last bit, and we try and bring the two ends of the rope together. So the first thing we did is a project called Chagos, which some of you may know is a giant archipelago in the Indian Ocean belonging to the UK government. It's a sort of slightly infamous place. In the middle of Chagos is an island called Garcia, which the Americans have rented from us and have their top secret super Cold War base where they still torture people. And everything around it is unpopulated. And the amazing thing about Chagos is it's an unpopulated, pristine ecosystem. And it's absolutely enormous, 600,000 square kilometers, and nobody lives there apart from the Americans. So WWF, ZSL, Pew, all these giant groups have spent 15 years building a scientific case to create a marine reserve there. And nobody had really paid attention to the fact that the government was going broke, and they were never going to pay for it. So we then went to the government and said, if we can find somebody to pay for it, will you do it? And the government said, hell yes, we'll do it if you pay for it. And then I went to somebody and I said to him, will you pay for it and create the largest marine reserve in the world? And isn't that great? What a great story to tell people. And he said yes, and he wrote the check. So we created the largest marine reserve in the world. And it turns out that we're doing that again. We found another marine reserve, and this time it's a bit more complicated, and there are people there, and that changes everything, because an unpopulated space is comparatively easy to do, but the moment you interact with people, everything changes. And there, it's a slower process, it's more detailed, but the same principle applies. The government wants to do it, the locals can be talked into it and persuaded to do it, because it is to their benefit, and then a mega donor comes in and pays for it. So that's fundamentally what we're doing to solve the problems in the ocean. The other thing we're doing in the UK is much more complicated, and I'll gloss over it, but it's a project in Lyme Bay, and there we have, for the first time in history, talked UK fishermen into voluntarily fishing less, and that is an extraordinary thing. And DEFRA are like, how did you do that? We've been talking to them for years, and they never fish less. And we've brought a corporate in, M&S, who are fantastic. Their Plan A program is absolutely brilliant and was kicked off around the release of our film, and it's superb there. As a piece of corporate social responsibility, it's probably without peer in the UK. So they are funding this program, and we have talked the fishermen into fishing less and staying out of certain areas in return for their fish being kind of labeled as a prestige project from a sustainable area. And it's a whole plan to get UK fishermen to behave. And this is a big breakthrough for anybody in marine conservation, because UK fishermen fundamentally don't think like that. And a lot of the problems have been because they fight against NGOs and NGOs fight against them. But the smart fishermen understand that if you don't work together, there's no fish, and they get that. So how do we actually do this? Well, the first thing is government. I mean, all marine reserves, any marine conservation is really an act of government, because the governments own the sea. We can talk about the high seas in a Q&A if you want, but that's the bit of the ocean that nobody owns, and it's bedlam. And the Chinese are taking it all from us, and it's something we need to worry about in the future. But right now, the good news is 90% of all fish in the ocean are within 20 miles of the shore, because for some reason fish like the shallows and they come in. So 90% of the biomass is actually within territorial waters, so isn't an issue for the high seas. So all marine reserves are acts of government. So the first thing we have to do is lobby the government. And in fact, they're all listening. They're all gagging for this, because two things. One, they want a sustainable fishery, because none of them want fishermen to go bust and people to run out of fish. And two, they all have these ridiculous UN biodiversity targets, which they have no possibility of reaching. In the UK, we have this incredibly high biodiversity target, which basically means we can never build another building, we can never build another runway, we can never cut anything down. And the government realizes they can't possibly reach that. But they've realized if they count the marine space as part of their land, which it technically is, then they can reach their biodiversity targets if they set aside huge bits of ocean that fundamentally don't really bring anything in anyway, and certainly don't upset people who want to expand their house and cut down a forest to build another airport. So they're really into marine protection as a way to increase that biodiversity. The second people who have to be involved to get anywhere are the fishermen. And again, the smart ones, they watch the movie, they get it, they know it already. The ones that don't get it are the giant international fleets, Spanish and Irish, who are just bad. And we're working on that, and they're going to have to be attacked at the EU level, and they're going to have to lose their subsidies. Some of you may read the Sunday Times. They've been doing some brilliant work, and they've been picking on really big Spanish fishing fleets that take like £5 million of EU subsidies and then come to Cornwall and completely strip all our mackerel out and bugger off. So why are we paying for the Spanish to destroy our fishing? That's the question. And I think in time that will get shut down. But for now, the smart fishermen get it. And then the last piece is the hardest piece, is the money. And when you set up an NGO, I don't know who else has started one. I see my friend Mike here has got a brilliant NGO called Greenhouse, which is much more successful than Blue. And we're talking about raising money, and it's relentless and never-ending and perpetual and nightmarish. And what we're trying to do with Blue is to find new sources of funding. So not just corporates. We've got M&S, we've got Ralph Lauren, we've got Six Senses. 80% of all holidays on Earth are taken to the ocean. So it occurred to me some time ago that we should be going after anybody associated with travel, because it's fundamentally a holiday story, saving the sea. So any airline, any hotel chain is interested in a healthy ocean. And it's a good story. I mean, we're trying to get BA to fund marine reserves, because wouldn't it be cool to fly to your marine reserve on your holiday? So I think corporates can be handled. Individuals, for Blue, we're going after people who own boats. I did a really simple Venn diagram. The world's richest people who like the sea, in the middle, people with big boats. So my primary target is people with big boats. A lot of them are Russian, and they don't really give a damn about anything. But we try. But that yachting community and the brands that associate around it are, in fact, some of the biggest and most powerful brands in the world. So there's some success there. But the real breakthrough for us would be if we can do stuff like blue carbon. There is an unbelievable amount of carbon locked up in the ocean. I don't even know, but it's gigatons of carbon. In particular, seagrass takes more carbon than a tree, weight for weight. And if we can get seagrass forests turned into carbon reserves like land forests, then we can protect huge chunks of the ocean and make them pay. And that's something we're working on, and it's a 10-year plan. And if we pull that off, then marine conservation funds itself. What can you do in the audience? Well, this is a bit easier, actually. The first thing you can do is you can buy and eat sustainably. We've had a great deal of success since the end of the line in getting pretty much all the big retailers to adopt sustainable sourcing practices. It turns out that M&S and Waitrose and people like that actually want to sell you sustainable fish because they don't like Greenpeace on their front door, and they actually want a reliable supply of fish, which is the key thing. They don't want to run out themselves. So if you go to Waitrose and you buy MSC certified fish, you're good, that's fine. But the big question is restaurants, because restaurants are actually the worst in the world for this. And 50% of all illegal fish are served over white tablecloths in restaurants. So I, for one, love Jay Shiki. It's just my favorite restaurant in London. Terrible place to eat, really bad. Nobu is the devil. And what you need to do is you need to go to restaurants and you need to ask them, where's my fish from? And when they say from the sea, you say, well, that's not a good enough answer. And you have to push them. And we've actually funded a website called Fish to Fork, which does really push restaurants to rate themselves and to analyze where their fish come from. And that's having some success. So buy and eat sustainably, pressure restaurants. If any of you know an MP, pressure them. And really donate, because marine causes, whether it's Pablo, whether it's Ed funding marine stuff, or whether it's us, is so underfunded proportionally for what it gives us. I mean, the ocean is the most important part of the planet, as far as I can tell. And 1% of 1% is completely inadequate, completely inadequate. So apparently we're going to do a Q&A, and I'd be delighted to answer any questions about anything. Thank you.